I have to play around with this because I didn't do a PowerPoint presentation. I just mounted it on slides, or so I thought. So I'll have to do the slide show manually as we go. I'll present today my work on the city of Touba in Senegal. Probably no one here has ever heard of that city, and that's too bad. That'll change today. My point is this is very present. It's a very new city. It didn't exist as a city until about 1960 something. Today it's Senegal's second largest city with about 700,000 inhabitants. It's also an autonomous city, meaning it was built and it continues to be run outside of the usual state structures. It was built by a Sufi order, and it continues to be run by the spiritual religious authority and its structures within that order. It has recourse to state agencies on a case-by-case or need-based basis, but the state and its agencies don't have authority over the site. This is actually what originally got me interested in this place when I was a master's student in urban geography. I've moved on since then. Okay, so it's a blessed city, and I use the term blessed instead of sacred so I don't get in trouble with some very strict understanding of what Islam is. So in Arabic, there is a difference between Quds and Baraka. By the way, your president's first name is Barak, which is the idea of blessedness and not sacrality or sacredness per se. It's blessed by God according to the members of the Muridiyya or the Murid Sufi order, and it is central to that order's mission as it sees its own mission, which is both spiritual and social, and it's central to that order's identity. So Touba as a term, the image of the Great Mosque, and especially its central minaret, is used almost, well, not almost, it is used as a label. It identifies the Muridiyya within Senegal and increasingly abroad, because we have Murid disciples now, for example, across the United States, including, I'm sure, right here, well, in Boston, okay? It's a very young city, Touba. It was founded in 1887 in a moment of mystic illumination by a Sufi master by the name of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba Mbaké. It only began to grow as a city after 1963, which is when the Great Mosque was completed. Until the Great Mosque was completed, virtually nothing else was built there, certainly nothing out of concrete or any permanent material. My point this afternoon is that Touba's urban configuration, its design, is integral to its spiritual and symbolic function. The design uses two important devices, the qutub, or the pole or axis that was mentioned this morning, and the khatim, or the seal, equivalent to a mandala. And I use the term khatim in preference to the mandala because khatim, the Arabic term, is what is actually used in North Africa and West Africa to discuss this kind of design device. And it's very much like a mandala in that it conjoins elements of circle and square, and it's used, as we'll see, in all kinds of circumstances, including architecturally. Each of these design devices, in its own way, ensures the link between the physical city in the material world and the ultimate reality of things in the spiritual realm. Each grounds the microcosm of quotidian urban life in the macrocosm of God's plan. The link between life in the material world and higher spiritual realms is understood within the Neoplatonic emanationist conception of a multidimensional universe, which had been very well developed by seminal Sufi theosophists such as Suhawardi and Ibn Arabi. This presentation will explore the process through which the city of Touba has been built. The history of Touba's urbanization will be analyzed in two successive moments, if you like: the era of the city's foundation by Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, and the era of its construction by his community after his death, meaning it's a collective endeavor of the entire Murid Sufi order. And that moment, by the way, continues today. This is by no means a finished city. So the guidelines I received when I was preparing this presentation asked that we look a bit at the motivations of the founder and the builder. So we'll start with Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba himself. His motivations were familiar to, if you know Sufism, his prime motivation, of course, was to grow closer to God, which is the what Sufis do. In order to do that, he had to isolate himself from worldly concerns. Early in this career, that meant isolating himself from princes. After French colonization in the 1880s, it meant isolating himself from French colonization. And he chose the semi-wilderness to do that in, where the city now stands. Third motivation was to educate his disciples. And this included the necessity of what he termed khidma. And khidma, I found this morning, is very close to the concept of uses that was presented by Kristen. Khidma is service, and it's service to God first, service to your spiritual master, but especially service to your community. To be a full member of the Murid Sufi order, you need to contribute on all three counts. And khidma, or service, plays an important role in what Murids do, including in this city. Another motivation he had was to set society on the straight path of Islam. Okay, not so unusual for a Sufi master. And specifically to facilitate access to paradise in the hereafter for his followers. So there's a rich literature he produced, much of it relating to access to paradise. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's activities in establishing Touba as a blessed place include the following. First of all, his acts of spiritual retreat in the wilderness. So I'm going to try to do this one slide at a time. Here we go. So I mapped his spiritual retreats. This area you're looking at now, unfortunately not so clearly, it's all urbanized today. But at the time it was literally a wilderness. It was uncultivated land. What in Senegal they call a forest, though we wouldn't recognize it as a forest from our northeastern United States perspective. So it's, you know, rather grasslands with trees, put it that way. And he chose this area to isolate himself so that he could devote himself to God. And his khalwas, his isolated retreats, then developed as important neighborhoods of the city today. One of his retreats was the central one. You can make it out here, okay? Which is the center of Touba today, where that mosque now stands that we saw at the very beginning. So this is a painting that was done by a Murid artist in 1997. It since has been reproduced widely. It illustrates a key moment in Ahmadou Bamba's spiritual career. Condemned to exile by the French colonizers, he's sent to Gabon, where the French hope he'll die of some terrible fever. On the way to Gabon, this is 1895, the French captain of his ship refuses him permission to pray on board. He says, fine, and he throws his prayer rug onto the ocean and prays on the ocean instead. And while he's doing this, the archangel Gabriel comes to him in his prayer and shows him this vision of what God has promised him in exchange for his devotion to the point of being exiled. And God promises this indestructible edifice, which will be his legacy in the material world, and you see it here in this illustration. His second range of activities were his written works, his oeuvre, if you like, his qasidas. Touba and a number of other places are mentioned by name. He also wrote treatises about paradise, about the tree of paradise, and I'll get back to that. It was mentioned earlier this morning as well, the idea of an axis mundi taking the characteristics of a tree. This is certainly the case in Touba, as we'll see. Thirdly, the instructions, often secret, that he gave to his closest disciples, his brothers, and his older sons as well, before his death. These are the people who inherited his mission after his death, and in pursuing various aspects of building Touba, they would consistently say that they are applying what they were requested to do by their sheikh, by their master before his death. Fourth, and I won't go so far into it today, we don't have the time, was his decision to name the places. So that the places he created, he gave them very specific names, and when you analyze these names, you find that most of them are named for one of the 99 divine names. And reciting God's divine names, these are the names by which God is referred to in the Quran. Reciting these names can take various forms. It's the most common Sufi practice. It's called dhikr. It means bringing God to your memory, no matter what you're doing. Keeping God in your thoughts and remembering or bringing God into your presence, even if you're doing something, very mundane, like, tilling the soil or washing the clothes or stacking bricks or whatever. You can perform dhikr in your mind by bringing God's names, and of course each of his names refers to some very specific attribute that he has, his power, his will, his omniscience, his mercy, etc. Okay? So Sufis have developed this. My point is, this Sufi in particular developed it through toponymy. So the people who live in this city, they don't just live in Touba. They live in any number of neighborhoods that have been named for either specific eschatological symbols mentioned in the Quran, or they've been named for one of God's attributes. Let's see. A number of actual real trees played a role in this, including the place he actually had his vision in 1887 when he has a mystic vision. It occurs at a spot marked by a gigantic tree, not this one. This is a baobab that used to grow in the cemetery of Touba until it died in 2003 and collapsed. Nonetheless, the idea of the tree, Touba in Hadith, is the name of the tree of paradise. Okay? Touba occurs as a word in the Quran in a different context, but in the context of recompense in the hereafter for believers who stay on the straight path of Islam. And so it's being named for the tree of paradise, but it's not the city doesn't intend to be a replication of paradise. Rather, it's the imprint of this archetype onto the earth. And we'll look at that as well when we get to the issue of the khatam. First thing I would like to do, though, is discuss this idea of the cosmic pole, which we had that citation from Eliade earlier this morning. Certainly Touba conforms to sacred space as Eliade defined it in that citation. I think it was, I forget who cited it this morning. Okay, thank you. Let's talk after. The city is intended as the imprint of this cosmic entity in this multidimensional universe, this entity which exists as an image or as a form, but has no materiality to it in the cosmic place where it exists. It acquires materiality in this world, not as a mosque or a building, but as the entire city. So the entire city is a materialization of Touba as it exists in the imaginal realm, and I use the word that Henri Corbin coined to, it's not quite imaginary with the sense that imaginary describes something that might not exist, but the imaginal which describes something that exists or that can be represented in the mind through an image, and this is certainly the case of Touba. The city is intended as a reflection or an imprint of the spiritual entity in the material world. And, well, I'll go to it right away.
You're getting close to 5 minutes.
Oh, no. Okay, I'll have to do this very, very rapidly. Let's do it this way. Okay, Professor Nader Ardalan yesterday's citation that all good architecture begins with a vision of the unmeasurable. This is how Touba fits between the spiritual plane and the earthly plane. It exists in various realms of reality in different ways. And this is my adaptation of Ibn Arabi's world tree adapted to the experience of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba in late 19th century Senegal when he establishes his city as a earthly manifestation of a cosmic axis that goes not just to the Sidratul Muntaha, which is the furthest extremity of the God's created universe, the closest possible place to God that a human can get, at least without dying. But it also extends to the depths, and of course the two extremities end up being the same place, all the way to the fish that upholds the world at the bottom of the axis. When he died, none of this existed yet, except as a project. His descendants built it. And let me go again rapidly, if I only have 5 minutes left. No one but myself to blame. There we go. Okay. Rapidly, how does this city work as a kutub and as a khatam? As a kutub, or an axis, a cosmic axis or pole, it does take architectural form. This is an 87-meter high minaret, by far the tallest structure anywhere around, and Senegal is as flat as Kansas. I can attest to that. And so you can see this from literally 20 kilometers away. And of course, when it was built in 1963, it stood in the middle of endless fields of millet. Today, it's at the center of this spiritual metropolis. So the city has grown around this particular mosque with its minaret. Okay. The city has a radial plan. This was established in 1958. Just as the mosque was finishing, the construction of the mosque was coming to an end, the Caliph of the Murid decided to start ordering the city around it. He asked his nephew to come up with this plan with the radial arteries coming towards the mosque, and then this grid, the grid already existed, this grid of residential streets around it. This is the characteristic of Touba's urban design. So the radial arteries converging on the mosque was a decision taken in 1958. And we have to go 20 years later . 20 years later, a second important planning decision is taken to encircle Touba with this rocade, this ring road. Okay? And my point is, and I'll be rapid, except that's 1 minute, okay? This is not a planned city. There was no blueprint for this city. It grew over several generations through planning decisions that were taken by the spiritual masters that continue to manage the affairs of the order in conjunction with murid disciples who happen to be architects and engineers and bureaucrats of state government agencies in the provincial capital of Jurbel, 40 kilometers away. So every time the murid leadership in Touba needs something done, they will call in one of these civil servants who technically they serve the state, but their khidmah also means that they serve God and they serve their community, and they don't see any contradiction in this service. Nor do they see a contradiction in what they do as engineers and architects, meaning working with matter, and the spiritual understanding of how this matter fits in a multidimensional world that they inhabit. So rather than a master plan for the city, what you have is a common understanding of what the universe is like and what this city is supposed to become, because building Touba, it's a process, and everyone is supposed to contribute in some way. Nonetheless, this ring road created what is termed a khatim. And I'm sorry I can't do this rapidly. Again, I thank Nada I got this from, it's adapted from your Sufi book. I replaced the Persian architecture with Moroccan architecture, but it's the same principle. You have here the sphere of the Quba or the dome sitting on a very cubic mausoleum. This is Sidi Ahmed bin Ali, or is it Sidi Ali bin Ahmed? No one was quite sure when I visited this site, okay, but it's really a very typical type of tomb in rural Morocco, and you see the relationship of this khatim in architectural form and the transcendence that it represents. Oh, okay, rapidly. In West Africa, in Senegal in particular, you probably won't recognize this as a mosque. This is a mosque. It looks round. It's not really round. The prayer room is strictly square, and it sits under conical roof. That's thatch. And next door is the women's mosque. They pray separately from the men, and it doesn't even have the square adobe mosque structure. It just has the conical roof. But you understand the relationship of a square and a circle in this instance. So I'd say in West Africa, the khatim or mandala takes architectural form rather often. Just a few more. Oh, I have a hard time without a mouse. Another Pular mosque. This is Dingarai Mosque. A bit more developed than what we just saw, but you see the same principle. It's a conical thatch roof over a very square prayer hall. Now, in Touba's case, it's not a, what happened? Whoa, okay. In Touba's case, it's not a building, it's the entire city that is built with this principle. And my contention is when you live in a khatim, the purpose of the khatim is to bring the microcosm of everyday existence into some kind of relationship with macrocosmic realities of life. And by living in a khatim, that's in fact what the citizens of the city are being in. So they live in neighborhoods named for the names of God, and they're living in a architectural device or a design device that is used by Sufis to place individuals or specific accidents in our material world in some kind of relationship with the higher realities of existence. And I think I ran out of time, so I'll thank you very much.